Welcome to Keto Life Support, where we make your keto life sustainable, fun, and low stress. I'm Kim Howerton, and I'll be coming to you weekly with some of my keto besties to bring you the practical, real-world keto advice that you need. Quick disclaimer, I am not a doctor, and even if we do have a doctor in the house from time to time, he or she is not your doctor, and nothing we say on this show should be taken as medical advice. Always check in with a trusted medical professional about your own personal medical concerns. Hello and welcome to Keto Life Support. This is Kim Howerton. And on today's episode number 45, I'm talking with my good friend, Terri Lance. Terri is an awesome woman. She used to work as a therapist, and now she is a coach with the fasting method. And she's an incredible individual. She has completely transformed her health. She had type 2 diabetes. She no longer does. She uses fasting and a low-carb ketogenic way of eating to manage those conditions. And she works with other people to expand their belief in themselves around what they can do. And so I thought this was a great person to connect with and make sure you guys knew. You've heard her on previous group episodes, but this is one just with me and Terri talking about just mindset stuff. Like, what is mindset? What is that all about? What's encompassed in that? It's kind of a bigger topic than you think. It sounds sort of like, it's like one of those courses you took, like when you were at your job. They're like, we're going to help you with your mindset, right? It sounds very corporate in a way, but it's a really broad umbrella that encompasses a lot of things that we have to work on when we change our life. So dive into this with us. We're going to talk about a bunch of stuff, and I hope it is helpful for you. I share a lot about sort of my history and with food addiction as well. So definitely don't hold back here, and I hope you enjoy. I am here with my good friend, Terri Lance. This is Kim Howerton, and this is Keto Life Support. I brought Terri on because I wanted to do an episode where we talked about mindset, and Terri is one half of the dynamic duo that runs, is it Mindset Monday?
Monday Mindset.
Oh, Monday Mindset. I'm sorry. So, Monday Mindset is a new-ish. Although you've been doing it for a little while now, it's a podcast you do with Daisy Brackenhall, who also does Keto Woman podcast. And what brought you guys to do that how'd that come about?
I think it really just kind of stemmed naturally from Daisy and I would listen to various podcasts and things, and then talk about it. And she said, why don't we do this on a podcast? Why don't we share these things we're interested in with other people who might also be interested? So each week, each of us we find something we're interested in, a podcast or a book or something, and then share it with the other one. So it's all focused on just kind of healthy mindset, changing things in our lives, improving things, all that woo-woo, positive, good vibe kind of stuff.
Got it. Yeah. I was saying, I talk about mindset really all the time as a coach, but we just throw the term around mindset, and it actually is a really big topic, I think, because it's everything that goes on in your brain about all of anything. That was very definitive, wasn't it?
But well, it is such a broad topic. And even when you first mentioned that to me, I thought, that's a good point. I don't know that we ever really define it often. We hear about it a lot, right, but don't often define it.
Right. Because I'll say, when I talk about, how we feel about ourselves, well, that's mindset. We talk about what our habits, that's mindset. Like, it can go from the very seemingly mundane to the incredibly deep.
And I think overall, another vague definition of it, it's just the overall frame of mind of how you look at the world, yourself, your role in the world, your health and your approach to that.
Yeah.
To me, those all make up our mindset, how we think, our internal dialogue that happens.
Right. And I think one of the biggest surprises people get, it might not be keto, but I think with any big life change like keto, but for a lot of people, keto is the first time this has come about. They get really surprised once they get through the beginning stages. the beginning stages are very much about like how many grams and this detail and that. And like, it's very like external. But once they get through a very short period of time where they learn the ropes, it's a big mindset change.
Absolutely. And I find this, part of my work also is with the fasting method. And so many people in our community eat low carb or ketogenically and do fasting. And I know a lot of people in your world do a lot of fasting and intermittent fasting. And I think it just opens us up to so much more self-exploration, things that we didn't even realize, what foods we were using for what purposes, how we were using food, how often we turned to food. And in order to actually make those things change for good, it is a huge mindset shift, as you said.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, there are a lot of different theories of addiction, but my theory of addiction, I don't own it. It's just the one that I agree with, is that for a lot of us, eating was a self-soothing behavior. At some point, we learned to use food as a fill-in for emotional competence, right? Like when I was a kid and I started doing like emotional overeating, which I started doing very, very young. I mean, I always liked food, but there became a point at which I began to self-medicate with food, which I think is a little bit distinctive from just liking to eat. I mean, children are biologically wired to want sugar, to want food. It is back from the time when we needed to always be seeking out food. Those are hardwired behaviors, or instincts. But there's a point at which it goes from seeking food to using food. And for me, there was a period of time when the use of food was my best option. And then there was a period of time when it flipped a switch into my coping mechanism began to harm me.
I think also, if you think about it, it's naturally something that is very reinforced. Even parents, if you have a crying baby, what do? You pacify it with food. A toddler, you hand them a snack, a food item. And I have found so much more in the past few years, even more than I was aware, to just really take a look at all of the ways many of us have learned to use food as entertainment, as our best friend, as our confidant, as our escape. I've been finding, especially during the pandemic and more people working from home, most of us now are within a few feet of our kitchen,
right?
Which we're not used to being. But I realize more and more, we have often learned to use food as a way of taking a break. And so if you're sitting at your desk 10 feet away from the kitchen all day doing work, every time you want a break, you walk to the kitchen, you put something else in your mouth. And I've seen this so much this past year. So just the kind of recognition how much food can serve almost every emotional need for us. And again, as you said, that requires us then to think about our relationship with food, our relationship with our body, how we interact with others about food. It's just such a huge topic.
Yeah. And there's really such a gamut. Like, as you mentioned, the boredom or the I need a break issue, which most people don't even think of as being emotional, but it is. It's not hunger, right? It's not actual physical hunger. It's something coming up emotionally, one of boredom, but we tend to think it has to be dramatic to be emotional, right? And then going all the way from that to like highly intense emotional states where people will use food to numb that emotional state. If they're like, I mean, what's all the old jokes about like, I ate a pint of ice cream because somebody broke up with me or I lost my job or whatever, to I just have the habit of eating a big bowl of popcorn while I'm watching a movie. Like all these things are eating behaviors that are really emotionally based, not at all hunger based. So to actually make a life change where on that other side, you have some freedom in your body, freedom from health conditions. I mean, not every, but like, insulin related health conditions and, you're going to have to make that transition through this sort of mental minefield that maybe you never, ever before actually examined.
Absolutely. And I don't know if you find this, but I think in the kind of ketogenic sphere and the fasting world is finding more and more that people are still falling under the old diet mindset.
Mm-hmm. Diet
That,
brain, I call it.
yeah. And even way of thinking about themselves related to weight, health, or any way to succeed with this is I can't do this. I've tried everything. So again, that self-talk, that already feeling defeated. And I think both you and I have been there. We've come to this from many other attempts. And I think that's one of the important early mind shifts for a lot of us is to start opening up the possibility, what if this does work well with my body? What if I can feel successful? And like I said, I think that's for a lot of us a hard one, but one that we have to kind of start with building on that mindset.
Yeah, I think, I know when I first came to keto, I'm like, I don't even know how I found the hope in my, like deep in my heart to try again, because I felt pretty much out of hope. And something I heard about keto on a podcast. I think it just like lit a little bit of a spark in me that maybe, just maybe this might work. And that was enough to start and enough to learn and enough to kind of put one foot in front of the other. But then what often happens once you start, like you get that momentum and you see some success, you're motivated. But then what happens for a lot of people, right? Because bodies are not calorie in, calorie out machines. We're not, it's not like if I lose 5 pounds a day for 45 days and blah, like we're not a math equation. There's invariably, with almost everyone, a point at which they hit struggle land and maybe plateau land. Mm-hmm. And that hope starts to wane again, or they start gaining weight even. And it's like the word I hear a lot is despair. Mm-hmm. Do you run into people in that state at times?
Absolutely. And I think another piece of it for a lot of people is even if you are reaching toward goal, mm-hmm. is what keeps you going. Mm-hmm. It was motivating at first. And many people, we all have kind of old dietary things about, oh, I'm going to lose this weight for this wedding that's coming up, or my family's going on this cruise. And so as you get to the cruise, the motivation's gone. And so again, how do you keep that motivation, that mindset of this is a lifetime? I'm always going to be working on my health. I look at it that way. I'm always going to be working on that. It's not about a number on the scale. My health is always going to be something I have to do. But I think the thing you just brought up is how to keep your mindset open and not get into that defeated despair mm-hmm. place, because we are going to go up and down. Weight loss and health is not a linear process.
Right. Aging is working against us at times.
Absolutely. And other factors, I had reversed diabetes and lost a significant amount of weight. And in the past couple of years have started to struggle. And, people keep asking me, why are you still fasting? You've reached a goal. But I've got some health challenges that I need to work on based on other kind of environmental factors. So that acceptance that our body is going to continue to change, our environmental influences are going to continue to change. And so what works today may not work in 3 weeks or 3 months or 3 years. And that mindset then of this is an evolving journey.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the thing that if people were honest, and most people are honest, but if people are honest and you really drill down to it, they came to keto. I mean, unless they were dealing with something extreme like epilepsy or traumatic brain injury, most people come to keto, at least these days, because they want to lose weight. And they're really not even thinking about their overall health. Well, I guess an exception is when people have type 2 diabetes. Then the problem is very acute. But at the same time, even those people, if they're overweight, it's very, very, very easy to put a lot of attention on the weight on the scale and not much attention on your health.
Which for me has always been a little bit of a sticking point, because I tend to look at it the opposite.
Well, you
And
are a unique unicorn of an individual.
well, even when people tell me their main focus is weight loss,
Yeah.
I believe them, and
Hmm.
absolutely I support that. And my belief is if we work on the health, the weight loss will come.
Right.
So I don't always say it that way, but I think my focus when I think about working with people is let's focus on being as healthy as possible because then your body can release weight and, work more optimally.
Yeah, I think that, I've said come for the weight loss, stay for the health gains. But it is very much true that when I find people struggling, we often uncover that there's some more complicated health problems going on, or, sometimes bodies just pause their fat loss for a very long period of time. And then you dig deeper and find out like some things health wise needed to be adjusted before the body was going to feel like releasing any more of the body fat. And I think that, like, I'm all for the fact that we are, as humans, can be kind of vain, and that vanity will drive us to take steps that we might not otherwise take. Like, as an example, tofu, right? Thin on the outside, fat on the inside. There are thin people who have type 2 diabetes or thin-ish, people that when they put their clothes on, you can't tell that they are a metabolic problem versus other people that it's visually more apparent, or at least people assume it's apparent. They may be metabolically fine.
Mhm.
And it's, from what I hear, much harder to motivate a thin diabetic to change than a heavy one.
Mhm. I definitely think it's harder for them to see the negative consequences,
Hmm.
as you said, because the tangible, visible ramification just isn't really present for them.
Yeah. Well, so when we talk about mindset, one of the key pieces that you and I have talked about before is, and this ties into, I think, believing in yourself, which we just discussed, is there is a strong identity piece issue here where, for me, I know when I went keto, it was pretty important for me to think that I was going keto, that keto was a way of life, that I wasn't just dieting. I wasn't on the keto diet in the way that many people use the word diet. And for me, it was a real shift that made a big difference in my actions. Do you have thoughts on the identity piece?
I do. It's for me, it's one of the biggest parts of the whole mindset question is I listen to people all the time talk about like they might say, I do really well when I'm doing keto.
Mm, mm,
And it just makes me kind of catch my breath like, wait, what do you mean when? Like if it works really well, how come you're not doing that all the time? And I don't mean perfection. I'm not perfect. I don't expect any of us to be perfect. But I think that idea of taking it on as this is part of how I see myself, that's been huge for me. People will say, well, how do you eat out at restaurants? Easy. I know what food works for my body. Doesn't matter what food's on the menu. I know which things work. Doesn't matter what type of restaurant. There are very few restaurants I can't go to and find a really healthy ketogenic option. But if I have to debate every time I go out, well, is this a keto night or not?
hmm
That feels like a diet. And then I know this is a topic you and I think, share some similar beliefs on, but like then people get into, well, I cheated,
Right.
versus no, you made a choice. But I just have gotten to that point where it's not that I never eat off plan, but my identity is I'm someone who eats low carb,
Right.
whether that means it's food I'm cooking, if I'm eating at someone else's house or at a restaurant. That's who I am. And
Yeah,
to me, it just takes away so much of the pressure.
totally. I think that is huge. I think there can be such a mental load. There's this fatigue, decision fatigue. I mean, people don't use
Mm,
it in this context, but it is, to have to constantly be deciding is exhausting. And yeah, when I look at a menu, I'm not, am I keto or am I not keto? I'm, do I want chicken or steak,
mhm.
right? Like it's more like, oh, like how flexible is this situation with the sides? Can I leave them off? It's working with what works for me. And do I, at this point, almost 5 years keto, sometimes veer in a direction where I'm like, the celeriac mash is a little bit higher carb, but it's still a lower carb choice. Do I want to have a couple of bites of that versus just skipping it altogether? Like, I make decisions that aren't black and white every day, but I never really struggle with the thought that I want the French fries. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think another piece, kind of going back to something you said earlier about the emotional decision making about food, is if I don't take this on as my identity. So I'm at a restaurant and I'm choosing what I'm going to do tonight. How keto will I be? I think about, for many of us, making that choice brings up all of the emotions. Am I going to splurge and do something daring and naughty tonight and eat this food? And then oftentimes it's a resulting guilt or frustration with self. Whereas when I go and know I'm going to eat a low carb meal, I just enjoy the food then. I don't have to have a feeling, positive, negative, celebratory, punishment, any of that.
Yeah, it's fighting with your identity it's soul destroying at a certain point, because
Absolutely.
life is hard externally, and it just is important for me to make it as easy as possible internally. And that's a struggle for me. I was going to say, I am not a naturally sane individual. Like,
you've worked hard for that, Kim.
I know. I'm like, I have anxiety. I battle depression. I second guess everything. Like, I am not like, I am a neurotic person. I'll just put it that way. And so I have to constantly work with my inner landscape, like, to do anything, like, not just like to decide what I'm having for dinner, but like, do I work on this project or that project, or do I, take the day off, or like, it's a Saturday, should I maybe take an hour off? Like, I have internal conflict. And so as I've gone through life, I have found that the more steps I can take to reduce the noise in my head, like, the better everything works. And for me at this point on my keto journey, it's sort of immaterial. The word keto, you could substitute another word in there almost. It's just like, keto is shorthand for me at this point to making healthy, good choices that support my sanity and my physical well-being.
And I think it's important then, I think this is true for you, is there aren't situations that make you just abandon that.
No?
So for example, in the US, we recently had the Super Bowl. And although this is not a celebration I engage in, if I wanted to, I could eat great ketogenic food and enjoy the Super Bowl. But I hear a lot of people talk about, oh, I couldn't help it. My husband or my kids had this in the house. And I sometimes think of it this way. I had a friend who was very vegan, very committed to her vegan lifestyle. She would not say, well, it was the Super Bowl. I mean, I had to have some prime rib. I couldn't help it. No, it's what fits your identity. And I think especially with keto, there are so many great options. There are so many recipes that you can make any meal, any celebration, anything you want that doesn't defy your healthy food choices. That to me is one of the biggest examples of it has to become part of your identity. Otherwise it's, well, it's the weekend. Your body doesn't function differently Monday through Friday and then differently on the weekend.
No, we have weekend amnesia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My blood sugar does the same thing on Saturday with sugar as it does on Wednesday with sugar. So again, I just can't emphasize enough how important I think this concept is. Making your goals, what you want, weight-wise, health-wise, lifestyle-wise, make that part of your identity, because it makes those choices so much easier.
Yeah. And I think, when I was first keto, I mean, you grow and change in your thought patterns. When I was first keto, and people would be like, it's human, it's natural, it's normal, to go off plan, that was only human. I'm only human. And it's like, yeah, I mean, no one is deserving of shame. Shame is a negative emotion. There should never be food shame. But I
Mhm.
also think it's a negative thought pattern to think, oh, it's natural, everyone does it. There's a place in the middle, there's a place in
Mhm.
between those two thoughts. It's not either or. Because when we tell ourselves, oh, well, everyone does it, it's like, well, yeah, but have you seen everyone?
Mhm.
Everyone is pretty unhealthy. And for me, I often have to ask myself, like, can I afford it? And that is on many levels. Like for you, because you were a type 2 diabetic when you first started low carb and fasting, and your can't afford it is what it does to your blood sugar, maybe, right? Like that's
Mhm.
your primary. There's probably on many levels. For me, my I can't afford it is why I did not deviate from the path, this straight and narrow for a good, maybe close to 2 years at least when I started keto, because I am very tricky and I am a food addict. And if I let myself have a side door, I would just be in and out of that door all the time. And I was like, I need to wall this door up and drywall it and
Mhm.
spackle and paint. Like I have to pretend there's no door there. And then at a certain point in my journey, though, I was like, oh, I have more space. I can make choices where I didn't have control before. And so, yeah, I might choose to take a bite of a cookie. It's just an example. Like I was just imagining myself at a Super Bowl party. I could take a bite of a cookie and the repercussions would be nil, probably,
Mhm.
I think, but I have to think about it, right? I have to think, well, why do I want to take a bite of the cookie? What is the cookie going to get me? What will happen after I take a bite of the cookie? Will I want another cookie? Will a bite of a cookie
Mhm.
make me want another cookie, right? Like you have to actually think through this whole thing when you're thinking about stepping off the path that you don't have to think about. You don't have to use that mental space. You have so much more mental space when you're like, this is what I do, and I do this thing, and I eat these things, and I just proceed.
And I think a big part of your success with that and success of so many people with that is really finding food that you enjoy.
Right.
Because so many people struggle because they are in the mindset of feeling deprived,
Yes.
that they feel so restricted. And, there's a little joke in the keto community sometime of like, oh, look at this horrible restrictive meal. And it's
Right.
delicious.
We're being so sarcastic, right? Our friend
Yeah.
Richards calls it what, boring keto.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if I talk to myself and say, I eat really restrictively, I can't have these things, I'm going to struggle more with it versus if I say, I really enjoy the food I eat. I find good options that fit my way of eating, and I really enjoy my food. That's going to be long term sustainable. It's not going to use up all of that added energy that you just described. Just simplify it so much. But that's a big mind shift
Yeah.
for a lot of us, a shift in our mindset that we have to start appreciating our options versus feeling like they've been taken away from us.
Yeah. And I think a piece of that is actually there is some science to this in that when we, so if you think about food, like the food that we've had around us for millions of years, or hundreds of thousands of years, as food has evolved. I mean, obviously, food has evolved in a lot of ways, and there's, even the brassica vegetables are totally different than they used to be, and fruits, all of it's different. But let's just even go back a few hundred years. If we look at the foods that we've been eating, our grandparents were eating, our great grandparents were eating, those kinds of foods versus the foods maybe I grew up eating more of. I mean, I ate but I also, I ate them all. I ate the normal food, and then I also ate the junk foods. But the junk foods that we got used to eating, they are actually chemically engineered to hijack our satiety centers and our taste buds. So I don't know how many times in my life I have been eating a food that comes in a bag and actually stopped for a minute to taste the food that I was eating and had the thought, this is not very good, but I can't stop eating it. And so, have you had a Pop Tart? I remember eating Pop Tarts and I remember thinking, this is really awful, but I will eat 12 of them. insert food here, whatever your
Absolutely.
food, right? Like we all had a food that we just like loved the thought of eating. But if we really stopped to like deeply delve into the taste we were getting, we're like, what? Why do I like this? I have no idea. Versus when you get those foods out of your diet, your ability to smell and taste and experience just goes through the roof when you're not being hijacked by the desire for junk food.
And I think that also can foster in people another mindset shift of eating more mindfully, paying
Mhm.
attention to what you're actually experiencing while you're eating, rather than my old way of eating was just shoveling that in to reach that bliss point.
Right.
I didn't even take time to notice that it actually wasn't good or that I didn't feel well while I was eating it.
Mhm.
Just to even slow down and pay attention to what food feels like as we're eating it, what it smells like, what our body does as we're eating it. That's important stuff to really change those old habits that we were mindlessly doing before.
Yeah. And, mindset, mindfulness, like it's all related, that when we slow down, when we pay attention, when we ask ourselves questions, when we get inquisitive about what's going on, everything gets better.
Mhm.
When I can stop and say, I mean, it even happened today, people. After I ate lunch, I was like, I want more food. Like I really was like, are you hungry? Like I had that, like, are you hungry? And I was like, I don't even know if I'm hungry. Like I can't feel it because I feel like this is a thought, like feeling versus thought. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go get some sparkling water and I'm going to sit for a few minutes and I'm going to work on a project and I'm going to see if this passes. And it did. I mean, I don't have to unpack my childhood about why I was
Mhm.
hungry today. But I was like, oh, okay, it passed. So whether or not it was true hunger, it likely wasn't. And it's okay that these things come up. And I have the space now because I'm not constantly in hyperinsulinemia land, to
Absolutely.
say like, what's going on here?
That piece around hunger is really important, going back to even emotional uses of food. Many of us have learned to say, I'm hungry, and that's not anything close to what we're actually experiencing, but we've learned to label anything, experience it as hunger. So, one thing I've often encouraged people to do is pick a couple of food items that you don't really love. So, for me, that would be salmon and steamed broccoli. And if I think I'm hungry, then I can say to myself, Terry, would you like some steamed broccoli and salmon right now? And if I say no, that means I'm not hungry.
Right.
That means I'm bored, lonely, sad, frustrated, whatever it is. And then I need to work on resolving that emotional need or whatever it is. But I think most of us have just learned to erroneously label everything as I'm hungry.
Hmm.
And it got us what we wanted. We got to go eat food when we said that.
Right. Yeah. I, on the other hand, could eat a good 4 cups of steamed broccoli
Ooh,
just because I like broccoli. Although my boyfriend would not speak to me for like a week because then I have broccoli breath and he's like, that's disgusting.
I might eat it
He's
if it was roasted, but steamed. Ooh.
Yeah, I'll do it. I love that stuff. But I'm with you on the salmon. I won't even eat the salmon when I'm hungry,
Yep.
legitimately. So
Yep.
anyway, but I think that's a good example. Pick your food, right? Like I think for me, it might be hard-boiled eggs. Like I like hard-boiled eggs. And if I'm hungry, hard-boiled eggs are delicious. But if I tried to eat a hard-boiled egg when I wasn't hungry, I think I would feel disgusting. Yeah.
You just highlighted another piece for me that has changed so much with eating ketogenically and then adding in fasting, but it's about not snacking.
Yes.
And, like you said, if I'm just bored, a hard boiled egg sounds pretty good because I just want some food. That's not about hunger. That's about
Right.
snacking, grazing, just kind of feeding myself endlessly.
Mhm.
And I think after having been ketogenic for a while, that's the first time I realized I could go without snacking and
Yes.
feel human.
Yeah, I think like if I recall, like anytime I was driving somewhere pre-keto, I would have snacks.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
if I was going to be in the car for more than 1 hour, maybe 45 minutes, there was a beverage and there were snacks. And a plane trip was just an excuse to eat the entire plane trip. And, it was just these places where it was like I was just always looking for those opportunities to snack because snacking is entertaining. And I like food and I like things that are entertaining. And yeah, but once you're keto you know what? I have an exception to this. We talked earlier about like being in sort of a diet mindset for a long time. Like I was on my first diet before my age had double digits, right? When we live in a paradigm where we're constantly being told that less food is better and that we should always get up from the table a little bit hungry, this idea that we shouldn't really eat, then you have to eat every 2 hours because you're never stopping to really give your body a nourishing meal.
Mhm.
But when you actually start transitioning into eating enough at a meal, it's enough to last you till your next meal.
But it reminds me of another piece from earlier is that I think a lot of us have a mindset, we've been taught that being hungry is a negative. It is intolerable. It is something we should never have to live through. And so, like you said, I'm going on a 45-minute drive and I need to have 3 snacks with me. What if I just let myself not have snacks? And I might get a little hungry, but we act like it's this catastrophic thing that we can't survive. And I think that's something, unfortunately, we've been taught naturally to do and to think. And the food industry certainly wants us to think that we can't live a day without many snacks. And it's a big mindset shift. Think about so many parents of young kids. They serve them their dinner. And if the kids don't eat their dinner, they say, you're going to get hungry later. And if you get hungry later, there's not going to be a snack. Like I've had to apply that to myself.
Mm.
Eat a well balanced meal when you eat because you're not going to snack later. And if you get hungry, it's okay. You'll wait until the next meal.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that discomfort is something we're just not used to allowing anymore.
Absolutely. I think that it's a complicated topic. One of the things is that people, when you're hyperinsulinemic, when you're
Mhm.
constantly on that insulin roller coaster, it is much harder to be hungry because that hunger is a different kind of hunger, I find. It's sort of a desperate hunger. And it's one that can come with weird low blood sugars and fluctuations, that our body is not in a hormonal state to deal as well with the hunger. It sends up more danger signals than it does, I think, when we're fat adapted.
Absolutely.
So there's that. I mean, like I remember I have a partner, Eric, who is very metabolically healthy and he can fast all day long. And I'm like, are you hungry? And he's like, yes. Like, it's like, sure.
Yes, and
But it doesn't, like, he's like, but it doesn't bother me. I have to think about it to think I'm hungry. It's
Mhm.
not plaguing me. He's like, around 24 hours. I'm like, I really should eat. And we used to go on vacation to like Costa Rica and it would be like 5 o'clock in the afternoon and we hadn't eaten. And of course I was really self-conscious all the time that I was always eating and he didn't really need to eat. So I would just white knuckle it. And literally every day around 4 o'clock on our vacation, I would start to cry. I would just start to cry, like just crying, like nothing had happened. But the stress of the hunger was so strong that I just broke every day. And then we'd like have dinner and I'd feel better. And then like this would start over again. This part of why I was not very fond of vacations. But I had to hide, like, not because of him, but because of my feelings about myself. I would have to hide when I ate. And we were like in a resort where I was 24/7 with him. There was no place to go to hide food. I couldn't get my fix and I couldn't handle it.
I can absolutely relate. And I'm glad you brought this up because I had kind of forgotten this stage in my life. When I was very insulin resistant, very diabetic, I could go to a Chinese buffet and eat 3 or 4 plates full of food. I was so painfully full. It hurt to walk out of the restaurant. And I would get in the car with a friend, and about 10 minutes down the road, I would start thinking about what I was going to eat next and what time.
Yes.
In some ways, it wasn't even just a physical hunger. It was an obsession with I needed more food. If people wanted to go somewhere, I'm surprised you could do that on vacation. When people would ask me if I wanted to do something, I had to, in my mind, think about, well, when will we eat? What will be available? Like it was just all consuming because of the hyperinsulinemia and the lifestyle I was living. And so there's so much freedom when you can regulate that and not feel that type of hunger compelling you at all times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was ruled by food for most of my life. And, I mean, I still struggle every day, but in a way that is very manageable.
Mhm.
And it was unmanageable before. I don't struggle is maybe a broad term. I have to think about things that I'm not sure everyone has to think about. I have to ask myself if I'm really hungry before I eat. I have to do, and I think for many of us, that's just what we're going to have to do for the rest of our lives. I mean, that could be lifted from me another 5 years down the road, but it's not a problem. It's just bringing mindfulness to my body, my feelings, my situation. And I think people are not prepared for this when they think they want to go keto. I think they don't realize what's in store for them in terms of having to unpack so much mindfulness. And they're like, I just want to lose weight. I don't want to do all this stuff. I just want to lose weight. And I think you'll agree because I know you well enough, but going keto and having to deal with my SHI, is it has been the best thing I've had to do. I would not be where I was a life coach before, for goodness sake. I had to deal with a lot of stuff and I worked people through a lot of stuff, but there was this little pocket that I protected of my identity by using food to numb certain things. I was a very calm person, but mostly I was numb. Those last few places of unexamined life where I was unwilling to open that door, I've had to open the door once I went keto and said, enough. I'm not going back. I can't eat those things. I can't medicate that way. I can't live that life anymore because I'm going to die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you said, it can still be a struggle every day, different kind of struggle. And one of the biggest things I hear from you is it's not a shame-filled struggle anymore. Where when you talked about the vacation, it was a shame-based struggle. And now it's I need to check in because I don't have really accurate hunger signals. So let me check in with that. But it's not berating yourself and living in that state of fear and shame. And so I agree with you. I think changing our lifestyle based on how we eat can really free us up in a lot of ways in our lives, can help us even connect better with other people. Because if you're not living from a place of fear and shame, that frees you up to be more connected with others, to do better work. It can just free you up in so many ways. So again, it might not be the path that people thought they were signing up for, but I think they're going to find that it's a really rewarding part of that journey.
Yeah. I honestly, when I was deep in my addiction with food, I didn't go a day without lying to somebody usually about food, but I would lie to get food too. So I was like, I have to run an errand and I'd have to make up a thing that I needed to run an errand for so that I could go through the drive-through and nobody would know that I'd done that and added that food to my day. And then I'd have to like chew some gum so I didn't smell like food. And maybe I'd have to even change my clothes. And what was I going to, and that was all this hidden life that I had to indulge my addiction. And there was a way I would always do it preemptively because, like you said, those vacations were actually very traumatic. I would have to do it preemptively because I couldn't let myself get hungry. What might happen this afternoon if I get hungry? I might not be able to handle it. So I should go out in the morning before he wakes up and get food so that I can eat that and feel okay and feel like I've got something in the tank. So because I couldn't eat in front of somebody because, and it was all in my head. It wasn't like anyone was telling me I couldn't do it, but I was just so deeply ashamed of my behavior. Now you, different than me, work with fasting more than I do. I mean, my clients also fast, but it's not so much my thing as it is your thing. Do you find there's a different level or different journey, or is it just kind of a continuum of the same one around mindset when someone is undertaking extended fasting?
I think it's a lot similar journey, but I think there are some unique things that people tend to experience. And one is that some people actually start to enjoy fasting as food freedom. Like they feel really good when they're not eating because they don't have to make any of those choices. And then they resent the food when it's time to eat because that's what's gotten them into difficult places before. And so sometimes people almost want to overuse fasting because it feels freeing rather than eating. Or when they start eating again, they overeat, they overindulge. I used to talk about it. It's like we kind of say to ourselves, "Ooh, I get to eat today." And it's like you just went to the circus and you get to have whatever you want versus kind of an even, steady, today I'm eating, today I'm not eating. And that there's not a big emotional change, but that takes some time usually for people to get into a good flow with that so that they're not overcompensating. They're not using fasting to compensate for what they're eating, and they're not compensating for the fasting they've done by eating differently.
Yeah, I find that a real challenge for people who have a history of compulsive overeating to regulate those states. Like I talked to somebody today who said that she did a 72-hour fast and then she ate so much the next day that she was sick for several days. Like literally physically throwing up. Like she just couldn't manage the extremes. Are there people you don't think are either ready ever, or like what's a sign that somebody might not be in a place to undertake a fast?
I think one, if there is an active eating disorder going on, and it's kind of a controversial topic within the so as a psychologist, we follow the American Psychiatric Association manual for diagnosing things. And binge eating disorder is a diagnosable eating disorder, but food addiction is not actually. So lots of controversy about those kinds of things. But if there's an active eating disorder, I don't think that fasting is really a good approach for someone at that time. They need to have pretty safe boundaries around that so that they don't get themselves into those really difficult positions. For some people, it's kind of the opposite, though, that if they have some difficulty with binging, they find freedom for the first time when they start using fasting. And I know there are other people in the community who think that if you have any issues with binging, you should not fast. But again, I find so many of the clients that I work with, it's the first time they feel some freedom from that. I think the severity or the degree to which there's an active eating disorder going on would be the thing that would kind of rule in or rule out someone. But the other piece is I think a lot of times, similar to the keto world, but in the fasting world, people start to feel a little bit of competition. You listen to what someone else has done. It's like, oh, she did a 72. Well, then I'm going to have to do a 72. And that's not always the best thing for each person. And so it's really gauging what schedule works for you. So, for example, when people struggle with overeating when they get to the refeeding stage, I often have them pull back a little bit, dial back their fasting, do some 24s, get to some 36s, but eat for a full day in between before doing another one to really, again, kind of level out that pendulum swing. I'm eating today, I'm not eating today, just kind of an even flow versus the drastic, I didn't eat for 4 days, now I'm going to eat everything that's not nailed down. There is a tendency for people to feel that way. And so I think for a lot of us, building up to a fasting schedule more gradually rather than jumping into the deep end of the pool is a better approach.
Got it. So kind of expanding your fasting window slowly with a mindfulness about how you're actually experiencing this and not keep pushing the envelope on the same fast, right? Like you can be like, next time I'm going to push it, I'm going to nudge it rather than push it.
And even, we talk in our program about people sometimes use some things during a fast as kind of a fasting aid or a training wheel. So if I do that for a while, maybe my way of increasing my fasting is that I just stop relying on training wheel.
Yeah.
And I don't even add more hours yet. But it's really about doing it in more of a kind of stepwise progress rather than jumping in. And people get very excited about it. And sometimes they feel great. They do a 3-day, a 4-day, 5-day, and they feel great. But there comes a time afterward where you have to come back to eating. And so if that's not a place that you feel safe and comfortable, I don't recommend jumping into long fasts. I think you need to kind of work up to those.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like I have people say like, I'm doing a 3-day fast. I'm like, have you done a 24? Like, let's, what's your history here? But I think, to come back to specifically the mindset topic, I can see that the complete removal of food can really help you on that journey around, am I truly hungry? Because when you have the option of keto food, some people just violate the hunger, like the learning of like, am I truly hungry? If you let yourself have snacks and you just make them keto snacks, you're never retraining your brain on that skill of, I guess, meal management or hunger management, where you eat your meal and your meal is done and you're like, and I'm okay like this. And I don't have to reach for the snack.
I think what I've really experienced in the program is watching more and more people. It really ups your game a lot. Because you and I were talking earlier about, only eating keto food makes you have to kind of say, am I actually hungry? What's going on? Am I feeling something else? Well, imagine if you're doing a 42-hour fast or a 72-hour fast. You've got a lot of time to be thinking about what is this? And honestly, a lot of free time that was spent preparing, eating, cleaning up. And so it really opens up lots of time for self-exploration and growth in other areas.
Right. And also that time, I mean, what you discussed before that I totally identified with, after like 10 minutes after lunch, you're thinking about dinner. I mean, granted, you can still think about food when you're fasting, but dinner is a long way off on a, 42-hour fast. So there's a way that I can see that in the wrong hands, it could increase food fixation, but done carefully and correctly, it could allow you to evaluate your relationship with your food fixations.
Absolutely. I found when I first started fasting, I had to stop following everyone on social media who was posting pictures of food.
Somebody should create a fasting filter for social media.
That would be
you're
awesome.
fasting, you click the button and all food posts will be blocked from your feed until you unclick it.
That would be great. And now I can see them again while I'm fasting. I can talk to people about food while I'm fasting. It doesn't bother me. But at one point, that was actually very triggering for me.
Totally. I mean, it's the same with keto, right? It's any restriction. Like I could not be at a table with foods that I liked when I first started keto. And now I have no problem sitting across from somebody eating what might be a food that I loved incredibly before keto. And I'm not bothered by it. All right. Is there anything else about mindset that we wanted to talk about that we have not touched on yet?
I think the only other thing is, kind of the self-reflective piece that you've mentioned, but how you talk to yourself when you get mad at yourself for not being perfect with something, when you ate something that wasn't the best choice. I am a big proponent of self-compassion, and some people think that means just being too wishy-washy and not holding yourself accountable. But really, self-compassion is being kind, supportive, and resourceful for yourself, just like you would for someone else that you love. So I think self-compassion is the other mindset piece that is key to all of this.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. On last week's show, I actually talked, or the week before, I get lost which week it was, but I talked about shame. And one of the things that I think is that what I said is when we indulge shame, shame leads us to indulge, right? It's this cycle that becomes really negative. So guilt is I did something bad, and shame is I am something bad.
Yeah.
And there's never say never, but if you're listening to this, I highly doubt you've done anything that really requires shame. Certainly nothing that you've done involving a snack is shame worthy. And so it's just a horrendously bad cycle to get in, because when you feel like a piece of garbage, you're a lot more willing to treat yourself like a garbage can.
And why would you bother doing anything challenging to reach a goal if you don't see yourself as worthy of that goal?
Right. There's a movie, Glenn Ross, what is it? Coffee is for closers. It's like, self-love is for thin people, right? It's like, no, like you can like yourself now. You can give yourself some grace now. Mm-hmm. You don't have to hold that out as a motivator for later.
Yep. And I think, unfortunately, in our culture, many of us have been taught to do that. Be really hard on yourself. If you're nice to yourself, you're going to let yourself off the hook too easily. You're never going to make progress.
Don't baby yourself.
That's right.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And I'm going to say that there is a small fraction of the world that seems to be motivated by that harshness, but it's a minority. And when you look at those people overall, in general, I don't know that their life is getting better from that situation. Like, yeah, maybe that one thing might change, but for how long? Like, they're not learning internal positive motivation. So they might lose the 100 pounds and then regain 200 pounds next year, because you can't continually be mean to yourself and survive.
And I believe, and be happy.
Well, certainly not. Yeah. Yeah. Because what's the point? Like, what's the point of all of this if we don't have some peace inside of ourselves?
I mean, I take it to the extreme. If my goal is to lose 100 pounds, let's say, and I'm really harsh with myself and I lose 100 pounds, but I'm pretty miserable because I'm so harsh with myself, I'm not really going to enjoy that 100 pounds of weight loss.
And you probably won't see it because this happens over and over again. I thought I would be happy when I lost the weight. No, I actually think the weight loss journey is a journey on which you get to learn how to be happy. And if you squander that journey, you're going to get to your destination and not be able to survive there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for having this chat with me, Terri.
Yeah, we could go on for hours about mindset, I think.
We could. I was like, well, this is a really big topic.
It is.
So where can they find out more about you and your podcast and all sorts of things?
So the podcast is Monday Mindset Podcast, and you can find us on Stitcher, YouTube, iTunes,
all the podcast places.
All those podcasting places. And then my work as a coach with fasting is through the fasting method. It's just thefastingmethod.com.
Great. And that is Jason Fung and Megan Ramos's company, right?
Correctamundo.
It used to be called IDM, and they moved the name.
Yes.
Yeah.
Intensive Dietary Management. Now we're naming ourselves what we do. We teach people how to fast. So it's the fasting method. That
makes total sense. But I just wanted to say that because sometimes I think people are like, what is this thing? When it's a new name. So yeah. Great. And we'll have your info in the show notes so people can click on that.
Perfect.
And thanks, Terri, for joining me.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Keto Life Support. Want more information? Want show notes? Want to suggest a topic? Just head over to ketolifesupport.com. That's where all that kind of thing can go on. By the way, I have a request. If you could go to your podcast host and hit subscribe, we would really, really appreciate it. And what would be even more awesome is if you could write a review. And what would be even more awesome than that is if you could write like a really flattering review. Just asking, you do you. All right. So thanks so much for joining